Deuteronomio Kapitulo 18, versikulo 18. Aking palilitawin sa kanila ang isang propeta sa gitna ng kanilang mga kapatid na gaya mo, at aking ilalagay ang aking mga salita sa bibig niya, at kanyang sasalitain sa kanila ang lahat ng aking iuutos sa kanya.
Seven Morning Star. We're going to pick up on Maharlika presents.
Prophets. How to start the book of Genesis would see an easy place and would provide the perfect quoted passage.
In the beginning.
In fact, that this is the way to start with a story of what occurred before the boy was born to the carpenter Joseph and his wife Mary. That history was written by divinely inspired authors between 2 and 3 millennia ago and represents the Holy Scripture of Judaism. It is included in a sacred volume, Tanakh, which is an acronym of its triadic parts of the Torah for law or Pentateuch, Nevi'im, prophets, and Ketuvim, writings. Other among their biblical scholars call the Tanakh the Hebrew Bible, considering this a neutral term for portion of the Jewish and Christian canons that are held in common. The largest part of the Christian Old Testament is drawn from the Tanakh. Any designation besides Tanakh would displace many Jews. The word Bible, which is derived from the Greek Biblia, the books, doesn't even have a precise translation in Hebrew. Still, in the Hebrew Bible, on the Hebrew scripture would be more acceptable than the Old Testament, which wouldn't even exist as term except
In the context of a New Testament.
the Second Testament concerned itself, of course, with the life and teaching of Jesus, who is claimed in the Gospels of the New Testament to be the Son of God. The New Testament argument is contrary to Jewish thought, which maintains that the Savior's yet to come. But the fact remains that narratives and the teaching of Tanakh corresponds closely with those of the Old Testament. At least with the Protestant Christian version, the Old Testament in the Roman Catholic and Orthodox Bibles have material found nowhere in the Tanakh. We see corresponds closely, and that's careful wording. When the early Christians were assembling their book in the century Christ's crucifixion, they accepted the Jewish view of history as truth with reservations, working from the Hebrew text. They incorporated advanced changes that would prove crucial. For instance, the mother of the Messiah would be a young woman. Say the Hebrew word Alma but the Greek Parthenos stipulates a virgin. Some chapters were recorded or ignored, some episodes sacred to Jews diminished. The first section of both the Tanakh and the Old Testament set forth religious and social roles. They tell the story of the creation and describe the Lord's covenant with Israel, the exodus from Egypt, and the Hebrew people arrival in the promised land. The dominant personalities in these early chapters include Abraham, the great shared patriarch of the three monotheistic religions, against Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And then, of course, Moses. The second section, Prophets, recounts the Israeli history in Palestine and is filled not only with prophecies but with wars and heroes. Principal among the latter, David's writings include meditation and on evil and death, as well as psalms and praises of Israel's covenant with God. And so in the beginning, the world was created, and on the seventh day God rested. Eden was home to Adam and Eve, God's perfect man and woman, who tempted by the supreme fate of the forbidden fruit, and thus fell from grace with God. Through their disobedience, Adam and Eve introduced sin to the world. In essence, this shattered paradise conflict, bloody conflict, arrived with woman Kudos' very next generation, when Adam and Eve's son Cain slew his brother Abel, then lied to God about the act. Am I my brother's keeper? Violence, of course, permits the word steal. It is an obvious and harsh irony that in the land once endemic, various geographical markers in the Genesis placed Eden in the Holy Land for the most interpreters was reads today, and has reads of and unformed history. The son of Lamech was named Noah, whom God looked upon as a just man, and entrusted with nothing less than the salvation of his race. Once the Lord, seeing a planet filled with violence, had decided,
I always destroy man, whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast. For it repentant me that I have made them.
God said to Noah,
Make thee an ark of copper wood. I do bring flood of water upon the earth, to destroy all flesh, wherein the breath of life from under heaven, and everything that is in the earth shall die. But with thee will I establish my covenant, and thou shalt not come into the ark, thou and thy sons, and thy wife, and thy son's wife with thee, and of every living things of all flesh, so of every sort shalt thou bring into the ark, to keep them alive with thee. They shall be male and female.
Noah did as instructed, and he, his family, and their large military went in two and two. Then saw the rains come, And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. The flooding lasted even longer, and Noah's ark was burned upon the waves. Finally, God made a wind to pass over the earth, the water as weeds, causing the ark to settle upon the mountain of Ararat. Eventually, the flood subsided, and Noah and his kin and the many animals existed the ark. The story of mankind would be allowed to progress. A 10th generation descendant of Noah was born sometime between 2100 and 1500 BC in the Mesopotamian city of Ur of the Chaldees. He was given a name Abram, meaning father love, or an exaltation of the father. Or is the time of Abram, upbringing would hardly have been a godless place. It would have a many-godded place in polytheistic city. Most of all looked up to a moon god named Sin. But other duties abandoned. How Abram's thinking evolved to monotheism, and thereby put him in a position to become the first patriarch of both the people of Israel and the Arabs. Is speculated what is known is that the Hebrew Tanakh, the Christian Bible, and Islam's Quran all agree Abram was believer in one God, the God, and was given by God an assignment to have far and wide, eventually to a land where a great nation would be found. In return for going, said God,
I will bless thee, and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth is blessed.
When God made Abram's name greater, he changed it to Abraham, father of Nathan. To greatly simplify the later chapter of Abraham's story and to explain, in brief, the split between Judaism and Islam in Genesis. God restored Abraham's faith by asking him to sacrifice his son Isaac. Abraham was on the verge of doing so atop Mount Moriah, when God stayed his hands. Saith the Lord, for because thou hast done these things, and hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, that in blessing I will bless thee. An angel told Abraham, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore. And thy seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. This prophecy will lead quickly to Isaac's son Jacob, and thus to Israel, and in the Christian version of Jesus. This is the earliest example of God selecting Jerusalem as the setting in which a crucial drama would unfold. It is to be his city of special purpose after the angel proclaimed. It provided a room as a substitute sacrifice. Isaac was allowed to grow, prosper, and through his own son Jacob, who would be called Israel. to find the Jewish nation in Palestine, but according to Islam, it was Ishmael, the other Abrahamic son, who was nearly sacrificed as many offspring, settled on the site of the future Mecca. South of Abraham's land is what is now Saudi Arabia. There, they flourished, spreading across the Arab world. The Muslim, now 1.6 billion strong today, represent the largest religion of Christianity. Abraham died according to scripture at the age 175 and was buried beside his wife in the cave of Machpelah, east of Mamre. Jews honor this heritage there in the west bank of Hebron's tomb of the patriarchs, where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, and Isaac's son Jacob said to rest. Much more happened through the centuries, and many more prophets came to prominence. Jacob fled Canaan for Mesopotamia, where he was taken in the mother's brother Laban. Then Jacob was a victim of treachery. He agreed to work 7 years for Laban if his reward was the wife he desired. Rachel, at the end of the 7 years period, Laban gave Rachel's sister, Leah, instead. Jacob has to toil another 7 years to gain Rachel too, by his wives and 2 concubines. Jacob fathered 12 sons and a daughter. The boys, as men, would become heads of the 12th tribe of the Israel. The 11th son, his father's favorite, Joseph, whose primarily created great unrest, which doesn't really pertain in this story. Nor does Joseph's time in Egypt and the time to prominence in the Pharaoh's kingdom, except that he had his family promise that his remains would one day be buried back in Canaan, thus re-establishing the nation of Israel, Holy Land. Joseph would die in Egypt at the age 110, but his wish would be fulfilled, perhaps as many as 400 years later, where Moses made sure to bring along Joseph's bones during the Exodus. Moshe Rabbeinu, or Moses our teacher, was the Jews, the lawgiver, hero above all heroes. To Christian, Muslim, a model of faith. To Muslim, Musa, the first prophet to herald the coming of Muhammad. He is said to have lived some 3,200 years ago in the time of Egyptian Pharaoh Ramses II, providing his existence up with Abraham and the other patriarchs being impossible. Some scholars have pointed out that several chapters of the Moses saga, beginning with a story of a baby in an ark woven of reeds, are similar to older Mesopotamia and Egyptian legend. So that even if Moses or aspects of him were borrowed, there are in his story entirely original philosophies, and this indeed sometimes endure through Jesus in my mind, and who would deliver modification of Moses' teachings. Moses, crucially, as a model for Jesus, seems real, and the detail and complexity of his depiction right down to a speech impediment. Maybe the strongest argument that such man did exist Moses is exceedingly human. Weak and strong, have yet tormented by doubt. A rebel but a faithful follower, the most solitary and the most powerful hero in the biblical history. After him, nothing else was the same again. That is certainly true. Among this life's many titanic episodes, Moses would be the reception of God's commandments, seemingly co-written by the two of them. And the thinking inherent in this law would be echoed in the mindset of the world's subsequent religious philosophers, from Jesus to Muhammad, to Buddha, to Gandhi, and even great figures in our own country, such as Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. We should know hell. That's a commandment. We would love observe not more than we love our neighbor. Really? Really, the kind of thinking entered the world when God spoke to Moses. Later came another great prophet, Josue, who began his career as an aide to Moses. And then came Saul, and then David. And all of these monumental figures were doing what would eventually be said by Christians of John the Baptist, preparing the way for the Lord. David entered Saul's service first as a lyre player, returned to assuage the king's despondency, then as a warrior, a role in which he succeeded splendidly. David's dramatic life story would have its climactic episodes in the Judean capital of Jerusalem, but it began on the hillsides. Tended their flocks. Sound familiar? That, of course, it's so accident. There are many echoes from the Old Testament in the New, and this is not only because the Christian believe Jesus is the answer to many prophecies. It is to tie him to the lineage of great heroes. In this case, the tie is firm and formal. Christian faith, Jesus is directly descendant from David, and Jews feel the coming of Messiah will be descendant from him clearly. Along with Abraham and Moses, David, second king of Israel, is to be considered one of the greatest of great figures in the Hebrew Bible. From his eventual headquarters in Jerusalem, David drove the Palestine back into Philistia, conquered several Canaanite cities, and expanded Israeli reach and power. David made Israel great. There, the warrior king was succeeded by a philosopher, King Solomon, a peace lover, hoping to guide the nation with an understanding heart. It was said that he wrote 3,000 wise parables and 1,500 lovely poems. Most of the book of Proverbs is attributed to him, as is the sensual Song of Songs. Thy love is better than wine. Solomonic wisdom and glory came to be reflected in the king's palace complex and in the temple. David had kept the Ark of Covenant, which contained the 10 Commandments in the tent, Solomon, beginning until the 11th, erected for it magnificent house of worship. The first temple in Jerusalem was destroyed by Babylonian in 586 BC. A new temple would be built almost 5 centuries later by Aching in service to Roman Empire, whose name you know, Herod. And so God's way and an involving moral code had been established through this many historical figure. The whole of the story now, the Messiah. It awaited the man who much of the world has long believed was Jesus. Your servant, na tumatagon. Thank you.
DJ Bob.